Hey, and welcome to Makin Space, and something Comet! Picture it, the year was 1998. All life on Earth is threatened with complete destruction after a comet is discovered on a collision course. The only thing that can save us is a hurried plan to assemble a crew, travel to the asteroid, plant a nuke, and blow it up. Who will save us, Bruce Willis or Robert Duvall? Yeah, 1998 was a big year for comet movies, Armageddon and Deep Impact. One blew up Paris, one bored us with Téa Leoni. Armageddon was brought to us by Michael Bay and Disney, so you know, not exactly scientifically accurate. Deep Impact got the science right, but it was like watching a documentary. With Téa Leoni. In fairness to Hollywood though, it's highly likely neither studio ripped the other off. That's because just 3 years earlier, the world watched as really crappy CG representations of the comet Schumacher-Levy 9 fell into Jupiter. Right, what do you know, right? Today we're looking at making a really cool looking comet. We'll only be using AE's built-in tools and the free video Copilot Orb plugin. A couple of things that's worth knowing about comets which will help us a little. Comets are made up mainly of ice, orbiting the Sun in wildly erratic orbits. The most famous of which is Halley's Comet. It has an orbit of around 75 years and is likely to be the only comet you will see with the naked eye. Last time it was near was in 1986, but I live in England and all our glorious rain clouds made sure I didn't see it. Don't feel too bad for me though, I did get to see Hal Bopp in 1997. For months there was this bright second star in the daytime. Movie financing being what it is, it probably wasn't the inspiration for the 1998 movies, but it was an awesome teaser campaign. Halley's Comet has been popping up throughout history. Pliny the Elder noted it in 467 BC, and it's most famously depicted in the Bayeux Tapestry of the Battle of Hastings from 1066. Edmund Halley charted its course in 1705. The icy tail, or coma, only appears as it gets closer to the Sun. The solar radiation starts to boil the ice off. And it's not caused by the movement of the comet. The comet always faces away from the Sun, which is really useful for us when trying to work out angles in After Effects. I think that covers everything. But you will want to install Andrew Kramer's free Orb plugin. We'll be using that. When you're ready, let's jump into After Effects. So here's a 1080p comp, and first thing I'm going to do is create a null object, which I'll link everything to. Go to Layer, New, Null Object. Hit enter and rename this Comet Null, and make it 3D. Now I'll create a camera, not just for the movement, but because later on some of the effects will use their distance to the camera, so Layer, New, Camera. And while we're at it, let's have a light for our Sun. Layer, New, Light. Make it a parallel light, 100% and white, and name this Sun. And now, select our null object and hit P on the keyboard to expose the position properties. Expand the Sun's transform settings and using the pick whip, link the point of interest to our comet null's position. So no matter where we point our sunlight, it will always point parallel rays at the comet. Remember what I said about the comet's tail always facing away from the Sun? For the Sun's position, let's set the X value to -5000, the Y to 540 and the Z to 0. Now it only needs to be so far away if we're adding a lens flare to it later. As it's a parallel light, it could be 2 pixels in front of the comet and the result would be the same. Okay, we don't need the Sun much anymore. Go ahead and padlock it so we can forget about it. So now we're going to create our comet's nucleus. First we need a texture. Go to Layer, New, Solid. Make it comp sized and click OK. Rename this layer Tex. And now go to Effect, Immersive Video, VR Fractal Noise. If your video card can't handle this, regular fractal noise is fine. We'll be adding this to a sphere in a bit, so this just helps a little. In the description there's a link to this project, which also contains a version of Andrew Kramer's seamless noise texture. Set the type to strings, the contrast to 60, and the brightness to 38. So we're starting to get an icy look. Expand sub settings and change sub influence to 75. That's better. Turn text off, drag it to the bottom of your comp and padlock it. Create a new solid, comp sized, and name this one Comet Orb. and go to Effect, Video Copilot, VC Orb. And because we've already set our sunlight up, the shadows are already matching. Cool! Incidentally, if you can't use VC Orb, then check out Makin Mercury with CC Sphere. In that tutorial, I show you how to use CC Sphere with a camera, and that's also included in the project file download. Set Orb's radius to 150, and now, holding the Alt key, click on the Position stopwatch and use the pick whip to link Orb's position to the Comet Null's position. Hold Alt again and click on the X rotation, and in the expressions area type time times 25. This will give our comet a bit of rolling movement. We can't see this yet as we haven't got to the texture area. In material, set glossiness to 0. It's a big ball of rocky ice, we don't want it shiny. Expand maps and set the diffuse drop down to our text layer, and set the second drop down to effects and masks. And do the same for the bump layer, but crank up the bump map intensity to 10, its maximum. Set bump fall off to 0. In UV, set the type to box. I think this gives a bit more of a craggy look. And now, while our bump map makes the comet look, well, bumpy, it's still perfectly spherical. I'm going to hack this in a way that only works because I'm going to cover it with loads of particles, but it helps make the orb layer less round. Obviously, if you have element 3D, then you'd have used a rock model and element instead of a sphere in orb, but not everyone has element money. So go to Effect, Distort, Turbulent Displace, and set the type to Vertical Displacement. As we're rolling the rock only on the x-axis, the displacement, which is 2D, will not show up as 2D as much. Drop the size to 56, and now Alt-click on the Offset stopwatch, and use the pick whip to select the Comet Null layer. And then at the end of the expression type dot thisComp, open brackets, square brackets, 0, 0, 0, close square brackets, close regular brackets, semicolon. This expression calculates the 3D position of the Comet Null layer for 2D coordinates. If you want to know more about what's going on here, check out my tutorial on linking 3D coordinates to 2D effects, a link for which should be appearing right about now. To show you what's going on, I'm just going to go and grab the camera and move it around a little. And then if I click on the Turbulent Displace effect, you'll see the crosshairs are stuck to the center of the comet, which is exactly what we want. Without this, the comet would move through the distortion. And do you see why I've added this effect? We now have an irregular shape instead of a perfect sphere. Now, let's make it brighter. Go to Effect, Color Correction, Glow. Drop the threshold to 15%, and the radius up that to 80, and the intensity to 1.7. I'm trying to create our first layer of boil-off. Change the glow operation to Silhouette Luma, and the glow colors to AB colors, and pick some icy blues. Now, it's okay, but I'm getting a harsh edge in places. So let's go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, Channel Blur, and set the alpha blur to 20 pixels, and drag this above glow. There we go. A kind of atmosphere is surrounding our nucleus. Create a new solid, comp sized, and name it Particles. Then duplicate our Comet Null and name this Null 1. And then go to Effect, Expression Controls, 3D Point Control. On the timeline, expand Null 1's properties until you can see both values for the 3D Point Control and the position properties. It might be easier to set keyframes for each and then hit U on the keyboard. Now, Alt-click on the position, and then in the expressions area type x equals, and use the pick whip to select the x coordinate of Comet Null's x, then type plus and use the pick whip to select the X coordinate of the 3D point control. Add a semicolon and now repeat for Y and then Z. Then, after Z semicolon, type open square bracket, X, Y, Z, close square bracket. This has basically parented the Null 1 layer to my Comet Nulls layer, but given me its own set of comp coordinates. And let me offset the Null 1 layer using the 3D point control, which I'm going to do now by adding minus 250 to the X value, and making sure Y is 0. And the reason I have done this is that I'm going to have my particles form in front of the comet instead of its center. So now I need to link my CC particle world to my Null 1 layer. And to do that, I may as well use my own preset, which if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out linking CC particle world to a 3D null. For everyone else, there's expressions in the description below. Just alt-click on the position properties of the producer section and paste them in. We're going to add duplicates of CC particle world a few times, so for now, select the effect, hit enter and rename this to dust. Set the birth rate to 10, the longevity to 10 as well, and set the producer radiuses to 0.095 for X and Y, but set Z a little larger, 0.105. In physics, set the type to fractal omni, set velocity to 0.3, and inherit velocity to 100%. Drop the gravity to 0.05, extra to 0.5, and change extra angle to 180. In gravity vector, set X to 1 and Y to 0. We're going to use gravity to replicate the solar winds. In particle, set the type to cube, set the rotation speed to 0, and the sizes to 0.5. And the max opacity to 10%. Use roughly the same blues from our glow colors for the birth and death colors. Set the volume shader to 100% and the transfer mode to screen. Okay, this is looking a little odd, so let's hide the sharp edges by going to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, CC Vector Blur. Set the type to constant length and the amount to 100, which still looks weird, so now adjust the angle offset to 270. Cool, looks a bit more natural. Now, select the dust effect and then go to Edit, Duplicate to make a copy. Rename this effect Rocks and drag it below CC Vector Blur. Set the birth rate to 0.1, and in Producer set the radiuses to 0.1 on the X and Y, and set the Z to 0. I want all the rocks coming out from a flat disk. In Physics, set velocity to 0.1. For Particle, we need some rock textures. I have this set of 4 rocks which I got from Pixabay, and I used it in the Uranus ring tutorial. I'm going to make a new comp, set it to be 300 by 300 pixels and only 4 frames long, one for each rock. And now I'll drag my rocks image into it, and then holding Ctrl and tapping D, I'll split the image into a new layer for each frame of the comp. And on the first frame I'll now center one rock and use the mask tool to isolate it, and repeat for each frame with a different rock. When you're done, drag the rocks comp into your comet comp on the first frame. And now go to Layer, Time, enable time remapping. Get the end of your rocks comp and drag it to the end of your timeline. And then hold Alt and click on the time remapping stopwatch. And then click on this icon to view the expressions library and go to Property and then click on Loop Out Type equals Cycle Keyframes. And then replace the 0 with 2. So this expression will loop the time remapping keyframes constantly. Drag the rocks comp to the bottom of the timeline, turn off visibility and lock it. Back to our particles layer. In the rocks effect. In particle, set the type to texture disk. Expand texture and choose our newly created rocks comp. Set the texture time to birth, so the particles will look like the frame of the rocks comp when they are created. Set the rotation speed to 150 and the sizes to 0.3. Max out the size variation, and set max opacity to 100%. Now, in opacity map, make sure the select tool is selected, and we want to draw a slightly odd shape. I want the rocks to fade in a little later than usual, so I need to reproduce this curve further into the map. That'll do. Set birth and death colours to a stronger blue, and set the transfer mode to composite, and expand extras and check the composite with original checkbox. Now the reason I wanted to have the rocks fade up later is I'm going to add a radial blur to make the ice look like it's jetting out, but that would make the rocks look weird. So go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, CC Radial Fast Blur, set the amount to 75, and now hold Alt and click on the center stopwatch. And we're going to use the same expression we used for the offset turbulence effect on the orb layer. So the gases appear to be coming up from the center of the comet, even though they're actually being generated by the other null. Now let's add some finer particles. Duplicate the dust effect again. Name this ice or ice crystals. Drag this below everything else. Kinda feels like I should be saying drag above everything else, but whatever. Set the birth rate to 5. Leave producer and physics as they are. But in particle, set the type to line. And in extras, check the composite with original checkbox. Now it's very white. We've lost a lot of the blue. So let's go to Effect, Color Correction Levels. And drag the black point to about midway in the histogram. And then nudge the midpoint further to the white. And now we can see our rocks a bit more too. To make the rocks actually visible though, select the particles layer and then go to Edit, Duplicate. Rename this layer to Rocks and drag it below Particles. And solo it. And on this layer delete all the other effects, leaving just the rocks. And uncheck the composite with original checkbox in extras. This seems to give us a bit more detail. And that's it! Grab both the rocks and particle layers and drag them in the timeline to start before the comp. So the comet has a tail. I found about 8 seconds gets the look about right. To add a starfield, check out my tutorial on starfields. And animate your camera. Okay, 14 pages in, and while we're done with this, let's also quickly make a 2D comet for your sky scenes. In a new comp, create a solid and add your sky or stars. I'm going to use my 2D starfield preset again. And now create another solid and switch to the mask tool and hold to select an elliptical mask and draw an oval shape. This will give us the comet's tail's curving look. And now go to Effect, Generate, Vegas, and toggle the mask off here. And in Vegas set the stroke to mask. So now we have 32 yellow comets in a circle. Set the segments to 1 and the length to about 0.07 and set the blend mode to transparent, the colour to white, unless you're creating the one from Game of Thrones, in which case red. Increase the width a bit and you can mess with the rotation to set it to where it appears in the arc. And you're done! What sets a comet apart from a meteor is that we shouldn't really see the comet move in the sky. And later on in this series, I will be showing you how to make a meteor or atmospheric re-entry too. Stay tuned. You're not really tuning in. Stay watching? Just keep checking back, I guess. If only there was a way to be alerted when I next post a video.